Hi, welcome to True Creeps, where the stories are true and the creeps are real. We'll cover stories from grotesque gore to the possibly plausible paranormal, to horrifying history, to tense and terrible true crime, and everything else that goes bump in the night. We're your hosts, Amanda,
and I'm Lindsay, and we want you to join us while we creep.
We cover mature topics. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, everyone. Today, we are going to chat about the possible inspirations for the movie Coraline. And we're talking about Coraline because it's going to be coming back to theaters for its 15th anniversary this year. So people are watching it again.
Yeah. Every time anything in the world starts to have anniversaries that are over 10 years, I just have this like deep and heavy sigh, like, oh, I'm old now, which like, I'm not that old. I'm not even 40 yet, but like, it's still like, oh no, like I can say 20 years ago and it's like me as a sentient human, you know, it's not like,
yes, you weren't a child.
Me being like, I was just a teeny baby, but no.
Yeah.
But it is a classically like spooky story, I think.
I think so. I really loved it when it first came out. And in my head, it came out like 3 years ago, not 15.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely not 15.
It's great. So if you don't know what Coraline is, it is a kid's movie, but it's pretty unsettling.
Mm-hmm.
And we've touched on it before in other episodes, but a lot of kids' stories have really creepy or unsettling beginnings, right? Like we did a whole episode on it a while back.
This one I think is particularly spooky. These are stories that I had not heard of. I feel like most people have not heard of a lot of these stories.
Yeah.
For good reason.
Yeah, we dug deep.
Yeah.
So if you haven't seen it, you should make some time to watch it. But let's give you a quick recap of what it's about. Coraline is 11 and she moves to a new place with her mom and dad. After moving, she's feeling bored and she's kind of neglected by her parents. They're not bad parents, but they're busy, right? While exploring, she finds a hidden door that's been bricked up. But during the night, she's able to go through the door and she enters a strange new parallel world. Now, in this world, everyone has buttons instead of eyes, and it's very creepy. She has another mother in this world, and this other mother seems like she's everything that Coraline's been wanting. The other mother invites her to stay, but in order to do so, she must get button eyes. That seems very creepy and like jarring.
Yeah.
So, of course, Coraline's like, this is weird, doesn't want to. Then she slowly discovers that the other world isn't all that it seems, and she has to escape and save her real family.
So, yeah, what a creepy fucking story. I do like creepy for kids, though. That's a fun time.
I do too. And I love all the Halloween costumes that I've been seeing already this year.
Yes. Well, you know, it's been around for 15 years, but it's also iconic. When you say buttons for eyes and you have that very specific bob, especially if it's blue, people know your Coraline. Like anything else is just gravy on top.
Yeah, she has the blue bob and then she's always wearing that like yellow rain jacket.
Yeah, but I feel like you don't even need the rain jacket. It's just button for eyes, blue bob.
Yeah.
So let's get into what inspired the movie. To start, there was a book written in 2002 by Neil Gaiman called Coraline, shock there. I say with a little bit of humor, but I also did not know that Neil Gaiman was involved with Coraline whatsoever.
No, I didn't either.
I was like, I don't know what I thought it was who did it, but
yeah, I didn't read the book or anything, but now I kind of want to.
Yeah, I'm intrigued. So the story is very similar to the movie with a few differences like settings and some characters. In the book, as always, there's bloopers at the end. So if you ever hear Amanda and I laughing at a part where you're like, that's not that funny, it's because we've said utter nonsense. For people who are like, hey, listen to us talk, we are not so great at it sometimes.
Sometimes.
In the book, Coraline goes through a tiny door to a new world, and then the being on the other side wants her to stay and to sew buttons onto her eyes. And the question still stands, though, like, where the fuck did he get this from, right? Like, where did he get the story of a little girl in a weird world with buttons being sewn into the eyes, right? Like,
yeah,
it's still fucking scary, even if we're like, okay, it's based on a book, but how did we get there? So Neil says that he got the idea from his daughter, Holly, when she was just 4 years old. So she would go to kindergarten, and when she would come back, she would see him writing. So she would crawl up on his lap and tell him stories so that he could type them out for her. And she called them Holly's story.
How cute.
So cute. Love a little baby world builder. So many of Holly's stories involved young girls who would encounter evil witches pretending to be their mothers. The witches would lock the little girls up, but they would always manage to escape. And he said that it was terrifying, but it was also cool that she liked, quote, this weird gothic fiction. I love when a kid is creepy. I love that for them, especially if they're storytelling on purpose, not just like standing at the end of your bed staring at you while breathing heavily. That's creepy, not cute creepy. Anyway, so Neil was like, I love that she wants to write, and I love that she wants to hear some scary stories, so I'll go get her some. And then he looks, and there's not a lot of scary stories for kids at that time.
Yeah.
And he wanted a scary book that was for 4-year-olds. So he was like, you know what? I'll write her one, which love that.
Yeah, it's cute. So what he planned is for Coraline to be a short story. Neil says that he borrowed bits from his childhood and even the layout of the flat where he used to live. So some of the story overlaps with like his personal experience. But when he's talking about the door that opened into a wall, that's actually something that he encountered when he was a kid. And he always wondered if he continued to open the little door, perhaps something other than a wall would be there.
Yeah.
So that was just like his imagination that he kind of interwove into the story. And then initially he had the layout of the story of Coraline for her to go through the door and find the other mother. But then when he started writing, he realized that this wasn't just going to be a short story. He had so much more to add to the plot. It took him 10 years to finish the story. And he said that he had to stop and start several times because, life. And then he'd pick it up again. And then when he did, towards, the last few times, he realized that Holly was now too old for the book, but that his second daughter, Maddie, was also nearing being too old for it. So he's like, I got to get this done.
Yeah.
I got to get it done for her, for Maddie. So when he read it to Maddie, who was 6 at the time, she liked it. So he's like, okay, that's good feedback. Eventually, the story got sent to Tim Burton and Henry Selick at Neil's request. And about a week later, Henry Selick called him and said that he wanted to make it into a movie in 2001. Years later, in 2009, the movie came out. So now we know the story started with his daughter, but then there's also other inspirations for the book. So let's start with the ones that Neil has confirmed. In an interview, Neil said G.K. Chesterson's quote really inspired him. And he summed up the quote as, "You are not telling children that the bogeyman exists, or dragons, or monsters, because they know they exist. Instead, you're telling children these monsters can be defeated."
Okay, I like it.
Yeah.
I also do need to point out at this moment that I have never called him that. I have always said the boogeyman.
Yes. And I think that's a regional thing.
Yeah, we may have talked about this before, but I was like, that's wild. That feels like a big regional thing, though. The boogeyman, because he's a common trope.
Yeah.
But interesting. Back to your bogeyman, though. My bad.
So he mentioned that this quote stuck with him. And I did look up the real quote. It's a little different, but it gets the same message across. Additionally, Henry Selick, the director of the movie Coraline, said that it was Alice in Wonderland meets Hansel and Gretel. Which, now I can't unsee that. It really is.
Yeah, it really is.
And many theorize that initially, Neil may have been inspired by Lewis Carroll's Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, because they do have a couple similar situations that happen, like following an animal into another world, mirrors showing another world, and of course, a talking cat. And we're going to bring up mirrors again later. Overall, Neil has done so many interviews and various introductions to Coraline, for all of the different editions that were released. And he's mentioned several authors, dark fairy tales, and other inspirations. There's also been a lot of people who have speculated what else could have inspired Neil, and they're basing it off of things that he's mentioned he's read or things that he's seen during interviews for Coraline and other works that he's worked on. So he's been in charge of TV shows and various other medias.
Yeah.
What we've done for today's episode is we tried to compile a collection of some of these lesser known stories and how it may relate to Coraline.
So the first story we're going to talk about is called The New Mother, and it's said to have inspired the other mother character. So this is an 1882 story, and it's by a Victorian author named Lucy Clifford. But it's been retold in several different folklore books, and it's even in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, so there's different variations. And so you may have heard this story, and it may have been called a different name. Some of those names include the pear drum or the drum. Each changes slightly, but we're going to review the basics of the original story. Just first off, I just love the names of the two sisters. Their names are Blue Eyes and Turkey. And in different versions, they have different names, but we're going to call them Blue Eyes and Turkey because those are the best versions.
Yeah.
Blue Eyes is the eldest daughter, and she earned her name after her and her father's eyes. I'm just pretty sure that most babies have blue eyes when they're born, don't they? Like, isn't that like a thing?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, they could have blue eyes and then change, because my nieces were very blue, and now they are not very blue. Anywho, Turkey, she was she was named after... I just love this so much. So Turkey, when she was very young, she cried so much because there was a turkey that lived near their cottage, but it vanished in the middle of winter. And she was just so upset. So they decided to call her Turkey going forward.
You're so sad.
I thought that her birth name was Turkey, but like, I love a nickname, but you cried a lot because of this turkey when you were just a little kid. So now you're Turkey.
Now you're going to think about it for the rest of your life because we're going to call you
Yeah,
it.
now we're going to make you sad every time anybody talks to you.
Yeah.
So the sisters also had a younger sibling that was still a baby. Their dad was away at sea. Good old Blue Eyes and Turkey would walk to the village, and it was about 1.5 miles away. And when they were going there, it was typically so they could go to the post office to see if their father had written them any letters. One day, their mother was like, the two of you, go to the post office, see if your father wrote any letters. In my head, I'm like, she was like, you were running and playing in the house. Why don't you go see if there's some letters, you know?
Probably, yeah.
But she's like, hey, it is cold though, so like hurry up and don't talk to strangers while you're on the way.
Fair.
And they're like, sounds good, theoretically. So when they got to the village, they saw that they had just missed a fair, and they were pretty sad that they had missed it, which, you know, that's reasonable.
Yeah.
When they got to the post office, which was located inside of a grocery store, there was no mail, which meant there were no letters from their father. So, you know, they're disappointed. And as they're leaving the village, they notice a, quote, wild-looking girl who was around 15 years old. She's wearing ragged clothes, and she just generally seems like she's not so happy. So they go up to her to see if they can help her with anything. And as they approach her, they see her hide something under her shawl. So they're like, this is suspicious.
Mm-hmm.
And she looks kind of as though she was crying. So they ask her, have you been crying? And she replies, she has not. So they talked to her for a bit, and they learned that she had lived in the village, but they had never seen her before, which I feel like you would notice another person who was like around the same age, especially if you're going back and forth.
Yeah.
Because villages aren't that big. But anywho, they asked what she was sitting on, and she responds that she's sitting on a pear drum. And the girls are like, we do not know what that is. And so she shows them. It's kind of like a guitar in shape, but it only has 3 strings and 2 pegs to tune those strings. It also has a small square box attached to the side. And so they chat with this girl for a bit more. And as they're doing this, she's talking to what appears to be someone in a little box. And they're like, she seems legit. We should hear what she has to say about the people in this box. And she's like, oh, no worries. There's just a little man and a little woman in the box. And if I play for them, they will dance.
Okay.
Presumably she's playing the pear drum instrument we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
But they're like, oh, reasonable. Makes sense. These tiny people in this box would dance. And so the girls are like, can you show us? And then she's like, oh, as a note, the little people in the box only dance for baddies. So you have to be naughtier if you want them to dance for you. And they're like, fuck, we're not naughty.
And the naughtier you are, the better they will dance.
Yeah, so like when you say better, do you mean like they aren't giving a lot of energy? Do you mean faster? I just want to know about, like, I've got a lot of questions as to what does it mean for a little miniature person to dance better. But anyway, the girls are like, you know what? I'm going to say this like a Gen Z. Bet, no cap. We'll be back. Take it out. It was bad.
No, I'm leaving that.
No. So then, you know, Blue Eyes and Turkey are like, we need to see these miniature people dance. Like, so fucking help me God. I need to see these miniature people dance. So they're like, we're going to be naughty and we'll be back. We'll be your naughty girls and then we'll be back.
So.
Amanda never knows what I'm going to fucking say.
Nope. So they go home, and then just the thought of them being bad, they break down to their mom and they cry about how they want to be naughty. The mom's like, what the fuck is happening?
Mom, I want to be a baddie.
Yeah. So the 3 of them chat for a bit, and the girls ask what would happen if they were naughty.
Theoretically, if we were a pain in your ass, what would you do?
Yeah. And the mom replies, then I should have to go away and leave you, and to send home a new mother with glass eyes and a wooden tail.
Okay, I guess that's reasonable. if you're going to be a little shit, I'm out.
I'm leaving.
And you're going to get somebody fucking weird in my place. Like, I can't get, that's all I can say. Okay. Interesting.
So, a while later, the girls go to the village again, and they encounter the same girl. She says that they are still too good, and they cannot see the little people dance. They explain that they can't be bad, or their mother will leave them. And the girl's like, she's just threatening you. All parents say that. She's not going to leave.
Reasonable.
So again, the girls are like, oh, okay. We can go be baddies then.
Yeah, it'll be fine.
We'll go home. We're going to be naughty. It's going to go great. We're going to see these little people dance. When they get home for tea with their mom, they go and they break their mugs. Then they throw bread and butter on the floor, and they just will not listen to their mom. Their mom then says the threat again, but the girls said, nah, it's not true. And if a new mom came, we would stick pins into her and send her away.
Why? Why is that what you're going to do? Like, I just don't think that that's an effective way of, who am I? I'm not Turkey and Blue Eyes.
That'll solve it.
I don't know why sticking, like, I'd be like, can I fucking help you? Anyway.
Nope. You stick pins in them and they'll go away.
Yeah, why not?
So the mom sends them to bed, but instead of going to bed, they sat up, they laughed, and they sang songs. The next day, they went to meet the girl again because, they were bad. So they're like, we're going to see the people dance.
Like, it's time.
But again, it wasn't enough. Not bad enough to see the little dance. So this pattern just continues. They go home, they're bad, they come back. It's not good enough for the dancers. And so as the cycle's continuing, the mom kind of breaks down. She cries and she says if it continues anymore, she's going to have to leave. And so they feel bad, but they figured once they saw the little people dance, they would just be good again. So, like, what's the harm in it? They go back to the girl and she says, still not good enough. But this time she added, hey, I'm actually going to be around your cottage around 11 a.m. and I'm going to be playing the pear drum. And if they were bad enough, they would be able to come outside and see the dance. So the girls were like, okay, great, this is going to work. She's going to be playing the pear drum, so we're going to hear her coming. So we're just going to be bad until we hear her coming. So they go home, they act like assholes. The mom gets pissed, and she's like, I'm done. She picks up the baby, and she says that she's leaving.
I'm fucking out.
She says goodbye, and that the new mother will be there soon.
Fucking out, you little shitbirds.
Right? Just, I'm leaving.
Mm-hmm.
You're bad children. Goodbye. So, around 11, they hear the little girl singing and playing the pear drum. She's coming towards their cottage. So they run out. They're like, Mom's gone. We got to see this dance.
I got to see these miniature people fucking dance. I don't need to have a good life. I just need to know if these people can fucking just move their bodies, you know?
Yeah. So, of course, they ask, can we see the dance? And they also tell her, oh, yeah, and our mom left. The girl said everything they did wasn't quite right. And it just wasn't enough. And then the girl was like, oh, yeah, your mom, she boarded a boat to meet your father. Oh, and your new mother's on her way. And then she just continued on her singing path and left.
But so, I mean, why do they need to go update her if she knew more information? Also, I don't know how old these children are, but I love the idea that the mom's like, they're a lot. I'm going to go get on a fucking boat with a baby. I'd rather be on a boat with a baby with my husband with these little assholes. Fascinating. So the girls were like, okay, we would love for our mom to come back now. So they start cleaning up the home and they're like, maybe if we clean up our mess, she'll come back. But then they just heard, they heard this loud, like, dragging sound, like something heavy was being dragged. And then there was like a, on the door. So they look outside and they're like, fuck, our new mother with her glass eyes is outside. And I guess apparently they don't open the fucking door fast enough. So she like breaks it the fuck down with her tail. So Blue Eyes and Turkey are like, we got to get the fuck out of here. So they run out the back door. And you would think we would have so much more, you know? But no, yeah. The story's just like, and then they lived in a forest near the cottage. And sometimes they come and look at their old home to see if the new mother is still there with the glass eyes dragging her tail on the floor. I love that the moral of the story is if you are a little shitbird, your mother is going to leave.
Yeah.
With the least annoying sibling. And then what will come in their place is a peculiar amalgamation of variables as your parent. Like, it'll be your parent, but like they're gonna have a wooden tail and some glass eyes, or like they're gonna have a backwards goose foot and they won't stop wearing a top hat. And they like, no matter how much you ask, they won't stop talking in like a fusion Southern and Irish accent, right? Like, I don't understand how we picked glass eyes and wooden tail, but I'm here for it.
I don't know.
I love a weird variable.
I want a second book with them having an interaction with this creature.
I want I want a second book from the new mother's point of view, where she's like, I heard there were these young girls who were living on the outskirts of town, like a mile away by themselves. And I realized they were home alone. And I was so scared for them that I went to take care of them. And they saw me outside, but they wouldn't let me in. But I figured that they were hungry because their mother had left and their father wasn't around. She comes to take care of them and they run away. And like every day she searches the forest for them to like help find them, to bring them back. And that sometimes she sees them outside and she goes and runs to get them because she's like, I'm sure you're hungry and cold. And they're like, ah! She's got a wooden tail. She's got a wooden tail and glass eyes. It doesn't mean she's a bad person. You know, maybe she's a good person with a wooden tail and glass eyes, you know?
Maybe.
Don't judge a new mother by her glass eyes and wooden tail. The oldest lesson in time. That's the story that I want, where she's actually this very nice lady who just has some details.
Maybe. But I mean, the weird eyes could have inspired the button eyes, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And the new mother, right? That it's not just
Yes.
a monster will come get you. It is a variation of your mother. She's got a wooden tail, glass eyes for some fucking reason. Also, I am curious how the fact that they have to specify that the tail is wooden makes me wonder if their mother had a tail. Anyway, neither here nor there. So, back to Coraline. When Neil Gaiman was writing Coraline, he was also working on the mythology-centered novel American Gods, which I did not read, but I did watch at least one or two of the seasons of the show, which is beautiful. And many people speculate that some of the research that he may have been doing for American Gods may have been kind of like the back of his mind when he was writing Coraline, because when he was working on both, like the time periods overlapped, which would that make sense.
Yeah, 10 years is a long time to write a book.
Yes. So there's also some references to old folklore, mythology, and just old lore generally that we saw. One example would maybe the other mother being called the Beldam, which means old woman, or might mean ugly old woman, which would, portray her as a witch or a hag with those definitions. But the origin of it might be from a French phrase, which is belle dame, which means beautiful woman. So if you put both the meanings together, which is pretty much what the other mother is though, right? Is that she starts off being a better version of Coraline's mother. And then it turns out she is not a better version of Coraline's mother. She is significantly worse.
Yeah, because at the end of the movie, she pretty much is a monster too. Like she takes off her disguise.
So there's also an old poem by John Keats called La Belle Dame Sans Merci by French, exquisite. And this means the beautiful woman without mercy. In the poem, there is a woman so beautiful that a knight thinks she's a fairy, and she's described as having wild eyes.
I love this. Everyone's wild looking, right?
You're so beautiful that you are fucking a tiny Tinkerbell lady. She enchants the knight, and she brings him to her elfin grot, or the translation would be elf's grotto or cave. He falls into a dream, which feels sad or like despair. He then encounters the ghosts of men that have also been enchanted and imprisoned before him. So they're like, just so you know, you're kind of fucked. This is what happened. And it pretty much ends up with describing his death on the hillside where he fell asleep. But so, like, these are just some of the other things that may have played into the other mother creation of the story. I also just do need to point out that I can't remember. Have you watched True Blood?
Some of it. I got bored.
Okay. Look, True Blood's been out for so long that I simply will not be apologizing for spoilers. Did you get to the point where you find out that the reason why Sookie can mind read is because she's a fairy?
No.
Okay. She can mind read because she's a fairy. And I feel like there was, whether you're watching it when it came out or you're watching it later on, there is a collective when they're like, and she's a fairy. I watched it with Ben. I rewatched it with him, and he was watching it for the first time. He's like, what is she, like a fairy or something? And I looked at him and kind of gave him like a kind of face, and he went, she's a fairy? Why? And this is very similar to things that happen in the show, is that beautiful women happen to be fairies, not just beautiful women, and that like people will like fall asleep and then find themselves in the fairy realm, and the fairy realm seems very lovely, but it's really not. It's like, in one scene I want to think that there's like beautiful like food and stuff, but it's actually rotted, and people look like mystical and fantastical, but like are simply not that.
Right. And it's just another example, too, at least for this poem, of two different people, right? He sees a beautiful woman, but actually she's there to kill him.
Yeah.
And kind of the same with Coraline. She sees what she thinks is a better mom, but no, she's there to trap her in this parallel world. So another old world thing that we have discussed now several times is the practice of scrying. And scrying could have influenced a bit of the movie, and where it could be seen is Coraline gets a doll of herself towards the beginning of the movie, and then she also has another object given to her. Now, scrying makes use of an object or a medium to detect messages or visions. Usually it's a mirror or a crystal ball or something with like a reflective surface, right? Well, in the movie, the button eyes on the Coraline doll seem to work in a similar fashion, because that's how the other mother is spying on Coraline. So she's seeing all of the problems that she's encountering so that she can be the opposite when she gets to the other world.
Mm-hmm.
Additionally, there's a scene in the movie where she's given a stone with a hole in it, and it's by her neighbors, Miriam and April. And they tell her it's used to look for bad things or lost things. And they actually like debate it in the scene. They're like, one of them's like, it's for lost things. And one's like, no, it's to look for bad things. And they kind of bicker about it. Well, we looked up what that object is, and the object has a variety of names, including a hagstone, an adderstone, a witchstone, or a fairy stone.
Okay.
Sometimes it's a stone, sometimes it's a shell that has a hole in it, but either way, it's something with a hole in it, right? And they're said to have magical properties. One theory says only good things can pass through a hole, and bad things cannot, and it'll get stuck in the middle. It came from the old belief that magic cannot work on moving water. So since these stones are typically formed by moving water, it works as a shield against spells and that sort of thing. Now, some people even hang them on their front doors or their windows to keep evil spirits out. And they're used on ships to prevent witches from clinging to them and to break up storm clouds.
Everyone knows witches love to cling to ships. Classic witch behavior.
Right. But I love that, like, it can be used in a variety of ways, right?
Versatile.
Some people like to wear them as necklaces, and it's like they only take in good health when they're wearing it. They can't have bad things happen.
Mm-hmm.
Some put them on. It's going to be your favorite because we know we love a decorated barn.
Love it.
Some people put it on barn doors to prevent witches from souring the herd's milk.
Will it also prevent snallygasters?
Maybe that's where they got the idea.
Yeah.
And then, kind of like dream catchers, they're sometimes used to prevent nightmares. And some believe that the hole is actually a portal or a gateway to see the fairy world. So, another world.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many more. There's so many more uses. And in the movie, Coraline gets the object and she uses it to see through her other mother's illusions. So when she's not sure if something's real or fake, she holds it up to her eye and then she can see what the other mother is like making her see.
I got you. Interesting. So we brought this up earlier, but the use of mirrors in Coraline could also have come from old superstitions. We've talked about some superstitions of mirrors before in previous episodes. We did like a Friday the 13th episode where we talked about superstitions once. We talked about broken mirrors. We also talked about superstitions with mirrors in our Valiska episode because the killer covered up the mirrors in there. But another superstition with mirrors is that they can trap souls, whether they are imprisoning lost souls or like capturing the soul of someone who's recently died.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of people cover up mirrors in homes after someone's died so that nobody gets trapped. Also, like, sometimes there's just things that you do because you're like, I would rather cover up a mirror and nothing happen than like someone's soul get trapped. Like maybe you're like, I'm 99.9% sure that this is not going to happen, but what if I'm wrong? Anyway.
Yeah. What's the harm?
So in Coraline, the lost children are hidden behind a mirror and she sees her missing parents in that mirror. So again, it's pretty much lost souls there. Then in Coraline, the small door she goes through leads her to another world. And surprise, surprise, we're going to talk about fairy doors here because that would make sense, right? Like this could be similar to a fairy door or fairies in general because of Neil's experience with the door that he had in his own home where he was like, I wonder if this just isn't a wall behind here. And fairies are also prevalent in mythology. And when you're thinking of entities that are a little bit like spooky and I don't want to say less scary, but they're a mythical creature where you're like, don't fuck with them or you'll learn a lesson.
Mm-hmm.
And that feels much more like the horror and scariness that you would give a kid where you're teaching them a lesson rather than just trying to scare the fuck out of them. You're not going to be like, and then Leatherface killed everyone. You know, like you're like, don't do this thing or something might happen, right?
Yeah, so he might have been inspired by that.
Yeah.
Like it's an easy way to talk to kids about something scary.
Yeah. And so in Coraline, to support this whole fairy theory, there's even a fairy ring near the well, which might signal that it's a way to another world. So the other mother also makes Coraline a feast to eat while she's in that other world. And classic fairy lore is, you know, that you do not fucking eat the food from the fairy world. I am imagining Pan's Labyrinth with the guy with the eye hands. A delicious looking feast, but don't fucking touch it.
Yep.
So it's just another layer of what would keep her in that other world.
Yeah.
And so the last possible inspiration is probably the most unsettling and is likely more of an urban legend. So we couldn't exactly confirm where this came from, like names or more definite information, but the story is chilling. And when we talk about urban legends, the idea of pseudo facts and pseudo names are always just so prevalent. So even if we could find names, unless we could find news articles, it doesn't really prove that it happened.
Yeah, exactly.
But so let's talk about this urban legend anyway. So it takes place in Hampshire in the UK. And then in the outskirts of Hampshire, an old woman took care of her orphaned granddaughter. And the grandmother was taking care of the girl because her parents, which was the woman's son and daughter-in-law, died in a fire. And she was very overprotective of the girl and would never let her out of the house. She was scared she would lose her. And the neighbors had never even seen the girl. And for this reason, some locals called her the bad mother. This has Rapunzel vibes, if you will, to me.
Yes.
Because of the stories the local children had heard, they wanted to meet the girl, which I could absolutely see that, right? A bunch of kids are like, there's a kid who lives in that house and we've never seen them.
Yeah.
And then it just snowballs and they're like, well, now we'll break into this fucking house to see this child. You know, like
we will do this.
We will find her. So they organized and decided they would break into the woman's house one night to see her. When they got in, there was nothing to suggest that a child lived in the home other than an old crib. When they approached the crib, don't love this, they saw the burned corpse of a baby with buttons sewn where its eyes should be. In some versions, they also include a seam that was sewed where the mouth would have been. Ugh. But the children realized that the baby didn't survive the fire, and they ran home and told their parents what they had seen. And the old woman was later admitted into a psychiatric hospital. And some versions include her taking a doll with her that was said to contain the soul of her granddaughter. One, that's just so sad, the idea of if it was real. That's so sad.
Mm-hmm.
My heart breaks for the idea of like, you weren't supposed to lose your kid. That's not how it's supposed to go.
Right.
But your grandbabies?
Sad, yeah.
That's definitely not how it's supposed to go. And so I could see how that could hurt the brain, if you will, make you do some strange things if you did.
Yeah.
But that's a fucking horrifying story. And what an urban legend, you know? It's interesting to think that like this could exist independently, you know, like that this is just a bizarrely similar kind of aesthetic of the buttons for eyes kind of deal. Ugh.
Yeah, it's unsettling, right? Just the thought of seeing that.
Unsettling and devastating.
And then also the origin of the story, it's hard to find. I also noticed when we were reading the variations of the story that most commonly it happened in Hampshire, UK, right? But Americans have made it New Hampshire.
Oh, yeah. That's the one we know.
That's the first one we saw when we were researching, too, is like it happened in New Hampshire. And I was like, that's weird. I'm looking for records and stuff. Can't find anything. And then I find older versions of the story and it's like, oh, no. It was the UK. So bizarre. And I guess that's common, though, with urban legends. It starts somewhere and then it kind of moves around.
Yeah.
But interesting, scary urban legend.
Yeah. It really is. It's deeply unsettling.
And because Neil has worked with, so many books and movies and TV shows and all of this, while writing Coraline over a span of 10 years, a lot of his research for the other stuff could have inspired it without him even knowing. But like we said at the beginning, he's done so many interviews and he kind of leaves little breadcrumbs about his inspirations in all these interviews. And it's really interesting to see how much can go into one book.
I think that when you're thinking of how a story is created, so often you don't necessarily want to pull from a whole bunch of sources, right? Like you want to make it as creepy as possible without repeating somebody else's story. And that's a hard thing to do, to create an independent universe where the characters aren't too similar to anything else, but aren't so far-fetched that you can't identify with them, and where the monsters are realistic enough to seem scary, but not realistic enough where you don't see them as monsters, right? Like it's a weird thing to do, and it's hard. And so I think that he does a good job of, whether he was purposely pulling all of these things that we found today in, or whether they were just like, interesting. That's an interesting element. I'll pull an element from here. I'll pull an element from there. It's interesting how much stuff overlaps with this story in a very creepy way.
Yeah.
And what a fun time we had pulling weird, creepy stories from like different parts of the world, and like putting those together to be like, these are all the things that are kind of similar, that we don't love this.
Right. And I remember when I first watched the movie, I was like, this is like new, right? It's kind of a new concept. I've never heard of button eyes, right? But
never.
Looking at it now, I'm like, okay, yeah, Alice in Wonderland could make sense.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different overlapping things. The talking cat, I love it. It's so good. So we, of course, want to know, what do you think about the inspirations or possible inspirations? And had you heard of these before? I know our favorite was the Blue Eyes and Turkey, mainly because of the name, right?
Love it. 10 out of 10.
And then also, what was your first impression of watching Coraline?
When I first saw it, I remember thinking, this is creepy as fuck, and perhaps too creepy for children.
Yes. And somewhere I read, I want to read the book. I want to read the original, but they made the YB character into the movie because it was so scary and it was her alone. And they're like, okay, this will make it easier.
Yeah.
Right? Like it gives her someone to talk to, and it gives her someone to go through this with. So.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, but I love it. I watched the movie again this week to prepare, and I was like, oh, I forgot about a lot of the stuff.
I forgot about nearly all of this movie until we did a rewatch before we did the research. I was like, I don't remember this. I don't remember this either.
It's very intricate.
But I also have a habit of forgetting any media once consumed.
But it is a good movie, so if you haven't seen it, check it out.
Yeah.
Now, we're nearing the end of the year, and so we do want to mention that we typically do not have new episodes for the month of December. So we only have a couple left this year.
Wild. I cannot believe we are nearing the end of 2024. Woof. My mind is blown. We are recording things in a bit of advance so that we can enjoy spooky season and the end of the year not feels quite so stressful. And so we're recording even further out. So it's wild to think that this is like, we have 3 more episodes that we're recording for this year, and then nothing till next year. Wild.
Yeah, it went by very quickly, but we've had a good time with all of these episodes.
Yes, always. Well, with that, have a great weekend.
Thanks for creeping with us. So we're back. We're recording this little section after we did our Coraline episode a while back. We do want to bring up that we did see that Gaiman has been involved with some sexual assault allegations. So we just wanted to bring that up, that we do acknowledge that. We don't condone anything.
Yeah.
They're allegations from what we can see right now, but we will be following that.
Yeah, we recorded this episode before we had learned about the allegations, and we thought that the underlying current of today's episode was more about creepy overlapping stories than it was about him. So we're talking about Coraline, not about that fuck.
Exactly.
I'm going to say that fuck because I'm going to go ahead and assume most allegations until we have some solid evidence on that, because from our understanding, it was several women, and even if it was just one, we're going to go ahead and believe allegations, because I don't think they would be coming to light in this way if there was not some substance to them.
Agreed.
Thanks for listening, and as always, a special thank you to our patrons who support us via Patreon.
Please see the link in our show notes to learn more about how you, yes you, can begin to haunt the dump, guard vortexes, or even become a scorching Sasquatch.
Ooh. Also in our show notes, you can find the link to our website, more information on our sources, our social media handles, and our merch store.
We'd love for you to keep creeping with us. So if you like this episode, please subscribe, rate, review, and share the show with your fellow creeps and or ghosts.
I beg of you. In the book, she goes through a tiny world to a new door, and the being on the other side.
A tiny world to a new door?
Yeah.
Is what you just
yeah,
said?
I did. Yeah, I did. Ugh. So, okay, in the book, Coraline goes through a tiny door.
You got it that time.
I know I did. But then I was like, I doubted myself. And then I laughed because I was like, that one's right.
Years later, now I can't talk.
When Neil was writing Coraline, he was also working on the the chicken tikka masala. And a monster.
She turns into like a sponsor or a spider thing, I think.
She turns into a podcast sponsor. Welcome to True Creep, sponsored by The Other Mother. I'm goofy today. Mom, I want to be a baddie.